Hi, good evening. Tonight I'm going to do the continuation of the video I did last week talking about revelation of productivity. And I talked briefly about it, but I said I was going to do like 10 series video. One of the things that I'm going to talk about tonight is some of the habits of those poor people that we were talking about. And every time I talk about this type of topic, the first thing I ask people is, really, how many people would like to die, spend their life poor and die poor? Do you know the answer I get? Do you know the answers I get from people? No. No single person wants to die poor. But one of the problems is a lot of us, especially the young adults of today, they don't know how money works. They have bad habits in money management, and that's what I'm going to talk about tonight. One of the topics and one of the key points is they hate their future. What does that mean? What does that mean when people eat their future? I think a good example of that is people think about just today. They don't think about tomorrow. They don't think about leaving posterity for their children. They think about themselves. With that being said, every time they acquire something, number one, they acquire something that makes them look good for now. They acquire things they cannot afford just because they want to look good. But guess what that leads to? It tends to lead to poverty. That's one of the the biggest habits that I think is very important. And why they do that, while they hit their future in the present, meaning they hit their future today, right? The second thing is they consume things. What do I mean by that? Most people, you think about a tree, for example, right? When you have a tree that has a lot of fruits, every day when you take one fruit from the tree, every time, and the fruit is not replenishing, is not reproducing the fruits, what happens? There's not going to be anything left. So what people do is, some of them, when they make their money, whatever money they make, $50,000 a year, $100,000, whatever, think of it as fruits. But what they do is they go to Gucci store, they go to whatever high-end store, they buy things. But they themselves, the only thing they produce is that money from their work, from their job, but nothing else. The tree of money that comes to them is their tree. But guess what? They spend it every day. Apart from paying all their bills, they buy other things that they can't afford. How do I know they can't afford those things? They buy them on credit, which is another bad habit. There is a way to use credit. I'm not saying, but majority of people that remain poor today in America, and we'll talk about some other parts of the world that we grew up in, their situation is different. But today we found out like an average credit card bill for an American, the whole bill is that they're paying is like $14,000. And most people will have like maybe a balance after they try to struggle to pay this credit card. They have a balance of an average of $6,000 or so. That's a lot of money, because when you have just $500 credit alone with interest rate to pay that $500, it's a lot of time to pay if you don't pay it off at one time, because the interest amounts on it. The interest keep increases it. All right, that's one of the habits. The first thing, they hit their future today. The second thing, they buy what they cannot afford, right? Which is, how do I know that? They buy things on credit. They buy expensive things, right? since I've been in this country, most of the lies that they are told, they need to do this, they need to buy something, be on credit so that they can have credit, it's all a lie. I love expensive stuff and I buy them, but guess what? I could afford them. The other thing is, most of them despise the wealthy. That's a bad habit. When you despise the wealthy, you're not going to learn anything from them. You're not going to learn their way of life, to see how they become wealthy. They don't become wealthy by consuming everything they see, by putting everything on layaway, by putting things on the credit card. They don't. They use credit card as a leverage, which we're going to talk about that. So don't despise the wealthy. All right? Don't. That's a bad habit. You need to learn from them. That's why last week I talked about productivity. You go to where they sell wisdom and do what? And you buy. That's what we talked about last week. Now, most poor people believe their work is what can make them wealthy. So the bad habit they have, they think even though it's good to work as a start, you have to learn how to be diligent, working, put your hand in something, do it. But last week I think I talked about productivity, right? You have to produce something that people will trade with you. And one of those things is let your money work for you. Your money is a kind of seed as well. It can produce something, and we're going to talk about it. But the bad habit of poor people is they believe they make money or they can be wealthy by just working hard. That's a bad habit. And I'll stop there tonight because I want to make this short. So in a nutshell, you have to know poverty can destroy. But poverty we're talking about in terms of financial, in terms of money, comes from bad habit that most people have. Comes from their mindset of acquisition of things, of spending what they cannot have, what they cannot afford today, which is what I call eating your future today. And it's a destroyer of destiny. It's a destroyer of posterity, to leave wealth for your children and children. A good example of that is people acquire, they go to school, got a lot of debt from school, but there's no job to pay for that expensive debt. That's a bad habit. It destroys you. Now they use all their life to pay debt upon debt. Then they will decide to buy something else. Cars, houses, everything on debt. Then they work all their life, even though they work, to service a debt without productivity. And they think they are productive by working. They end up poor because they cannot leave anything in inheritance for anybody. I hope this will help a lot of people to understand that do not eat your future now. Thank you very much.